Hi everybody, Sue here from Verdigris Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to do a colour wash finish on one of our plaster hearts, and this is the process that we use in our workshops, so you'll be able to do it on any project that you have. This is the heart that we're going to start with, and we're going to use our Magic Carpet Ride Passion for DIY paint, which is a turquoise colour. Really nice and bright, but as you can see with the colour wash, it tones it down really quite dramatically, and then we're going to put a gold highlight on it. So I'm going to go right through that process today, and we'll see how we go. First of all, when you are painting any paint, make sure that if your brush has been in water, that you actually wipe the excess out, because you don't want big runs and dribbles. So that's the first thing, is to wipe any excess water out of your brush, and then you can just start painting. With the chalk paint, you can actually paint directly over the plaster, which is really easy because it's such a matte porous finish. Paint, it grabs right into the plaster and becomes part of it, so it's actually more versatile than other acrylic paint. So we're going to just really quickly paint our heart or our project, and the more detail for this the better, but you can do it on a flat surface. But when I'm doing the hearts, I always pick them up in my hand, or any project, pick it up in my hand and then paint it, because you can actually see where you've been. You can turn it up and around. You might get a little paint on your fingers, but it washes off so in water. And by doing it this way, you don't actually get a ridge of paint around the edge. So wriggle the brush around into all those little nooks and crannies. And you'll find that sometimes you think, oh gosh, I thought I painted that. And you probably have. It's just that sometimes you get air bubbles in your paint when you're painting, especially if you're painting quickly, like I do. You get little air bubbles, and when they pop, they expose the base again. But don't worry too much about it, because you'll get that on your next coat. We're going to be putting 2 coats on, front and back. So just those last little bits underneath, any little white bits there that you can see, you can just give them a poke around with a brush. And you don't need a lot of paint, especially when you're working with something so detailed as I am with this heart. A lot of them aren't as detailed as this, but if you've got lots of detail, make sure that you don't have too much paint, because the last thing you want is to get thick, gluggy paint stuck into all the crevices, because then it just will take so much longer to dry. So there we go. We have our heart finished, painted, first coat, and then we're going to dry it. I'm going to use a hairdryer, and just to speed up the process, and just make sure that when you're drying, don't get too close, which is something that I always do, and I sort of always knock the top of my projects and end up having to touch it up. But if you just dry it, give it a little bit of heat all over, and make sure that it's really dry before you start your next coat, because it will, when you put wet paint over to paint on paint that's not quite dry, then it will reliven it, and you can almost take it off. Okay, so I'm going to dry it now, and then we'll be ready for painting the back. There we go, all dry. So now I'm going to paint the back. That's right, paint the back. Anytime that I do a project, I always paint the back, and I think it's a really good practice to get into. It's something that when you put all your effort and love and everything into making a project, especially if you're making it for a gift or for sale, but even for yourself, make sure you paint the back, because what happens is when you take it home and or you've finished it and you go to show your husband or your mother and your sister, your daughter, and they look at it and you're so proud, and then the first thing they do is turn it over and the back's not painted or the back's not finished, it's not tidy. So always a tidy back, and that's why we're going to paint the back. And in my workshops, if you ever come to my workshops, you will recall, or been to one, you'll recall that that is one of the things I get asked all the time. Why do we have to paint the back? Because no one sees it. Well, believe me, they do. So just quickly on the back here, doesn't take too long. Nice little dip in there, and then back to drying. There we go, all done, nice and dry on the back. So now we're going to do the front again, because we always put 2 coats on, and the second coat you'll find doesn't take as long and doesn't take as much paint as your first coat, because you've already got it sealed, got the plaster sealed, or your project wood, whatever it might be. It's already got the seal on it. So we'll just quickly go over this, a little bit more paint there. And then you can pick up any of the little bits that you missed the first time. And as you can see, holding it in your hand like this, you can actually turn it upside down and turn it over and see all those little bits that you've missed. If you have it on the table in front of you, and you're painting it like this, you get a little ridge around here. So to avoid that, hold it in your hands. You might get a little bit of grub on your hands, bit of paint, but it will definitely wash off in water. So there we go, our second coat on the front, and back to drying. Right, second coat dry. One more on the back, and then we'll be ready for our colour wash. Keep in mind, when you're painting anything, it doesn't matter with what paint, or whether it's, you know, our chalk paint, or whether it's just acrylic paint, all paint, when it's first dry, especially when you're force drying it with a hairdryer or a heat source, is only touch dry. The chalk paint is cured within 4 to 5 days, and then it's just, you know, it will be hard. A normal acrylic paint can be up to 21 days. So as time goes on, it gets harder and harder, but today it's only touch dry, so we have to be pretty careful with it and not you know, be too rough. So once again, back to drying. Right, for our colour wash, we're going to be using black today. We're just using our Passion for DIY chalk paint in Thunder Road. And you can use any colour. You can, I mean, on this heart in particular, you could use, for instance, you could do white, or even a pink or a grey, which would look great. But we're using the black today because I like the old aged sort of antique look of it. And so what you're going to need is a little bit of black paint, or a colour of your choice. You just need a little bit for this, because we're going to water it down. You're going to need a dry cloth and a damp cloth, not wet, just damp. And we're going to make our colour wash by adding probably a third of water to 2/3 paint. Just a little bit of water in there to mix it down so that it flows easily. And what happens with this, we're going to put it on and we're going to wipe it off. You'll also need a paper towel. When you're doing a colour wash or any paint finish, what you need to do is to make sure that your project, in this case our heart, is cold. Or it can be just very lightly warm, but not hot, have no heat in it. Otherwise, when you put your colour wash on, you won't be able to take it off, and you'll be left with a very dark heart or project. So my paint is all watered down. Now very quickly I'm going to put my wash on and just slip, slop, slap. Let it flow into all of those nooks and crannies, all those areas. Don't worry about the back at the moment. It'll be quite messy, but we'll fix that up shortly. And just really quickly flow all that paint in. And that's why holding it in your hand at this stage is really the best thing to do, the best way to do it, because if you miss some, it's very dramatically noticeable if you miss a little bit. So that's that. Paper towel. And we're just going to do one push on with a paper towel, and that's just to take off as much excess as we want, as we can. So then with the dry cloth, I'm just going to take off any more wet paint that might be on there, and you'll see that it's still very dark, but that's okay because we're going to take that down a little bit. I actually personally like them quite dark. So then we take our damp cloth, and you can take away as much of that darkness as you want. Like I said before, I like it quite dark so that there's quite a dramatic contrast and that very aged, old, antiqued look. So there we go. That's about as much as I'm going to be taking off my heart. But you can actually take a lot more off of the black off, or the colour wash off if you want. So now I'm just going to dry that. As you can see, the back's really messy, but we're going to fix that up shortly. Right, that's dry. So now with the back, I'm just going to get my brush again, put a slip, slop, slap on the back. And like you might have heard me before saying that when you put wet paint over almost dry paint, it starts to reliven it, and that's what's going to happen here. That messiness on the back, we can actually work that into an almost sort of marbly effect, so that the back is like the front. So it's still got that, just like a little marbly pattern on the back, and we'll give that a quick dry as well. For our gold highlights today, we're going to be using dry brushing technique, and that's exactly what it is. You need a dry brush, and the brushes that I use they're just like the chip brushes that you get from Bunnings or Mitre 10, just from the hardware store. They're really, really inexpensive, and they're a natural hog hair bristle brush. So if you can dry them with a hairdryer if you've only got one and you need to reuse it for something, because the important thing about dry brushing is that you use a dry brush. So we're going to need a piece of paper towel and a little bit of paint, and we're just using a gold paint today. A little bit of paint on your brush, and you don't need much either. So I get asked a lot, why do we waste so much? Well, to get the effect that you want, a nice soft feathery effect, you really need to have very little paint on your brush. But to make it go a long way, you work that paint right into your brush, and then you wipe the excess paint off. So a little bit of paint on the brush, and we're going to work it in on our paper towel. Work it right into the brush, and then on a piece of clean paper towel, I'm going to take the excess wet paint off, because what you want it almost dry, and I usually go on my hand, because then I can tell if I've got enough off. You don't have to do that. If you just actually wipe it off, flick it onto your paper towel, and you'll see that there's no drag lines, then you'll know that that's pretty much right. So then once again, holding my project in my hand, I'm going to very lightly tickle the surface. And the dry brushing is a wrist action rather than an arm action. You're not painting it, you're just tickling it. So just very lightly all over, and it's just like giving it a light tickle. And sometimes you'll find that you think, oh my gosh, nothing's happening. Well, it really is. Your dry brushing is like a build-up of colour. So you don't want too much on there, otherwise you may as well just paint it. So you're getting a very loose, light wrist action going. And then you are just tickling that surface. And I don't know whether you'll be able to see it at this stage, but it's just got a very light haze of gold over the relief. And then we build that up again. So in between each, even though it's pretty dry, we just give it a quick zhuzh with the hairdryer, or leave it for a couple of minutes, and then once again. A little bit more paint into your brush, work it right in, and then on the clean side, rub it off, and then you'll just have that right amount. So you can actually build up the depth of this highlight as much as you want. I'm just going to give it one more go over here, and then it'll be done. Just like that. And then I'm just going to go over and use the excess, the rest of it on the back, just to give it a little bit of a glow. And that's my heart painted. So now we're just going to, because it's dry brushing once again, just going to give it a little zhuzh with the dryer. And now it's ready to seal. So you can see just how it's got quite a bit of gold on there now. And once we seal it as well, it's quite flat. Once we seal it, then it'll make all those colours pop again. Put a little on my paint. Another piece of paper towel and a clean brush for sealing. Wipe all that excess water out and make sure your brush is quite clean, especially if you've been using your paintbrush or your colour wash brush. Just make sure that it's quite clean, because you don't want to get any muddy residue on it. And today for sealing, we're using our Passion for DIY poly sealer, which is an all-round sealer that you can put on any project. And I'm going to get another clean piece of paper towel, because I don't want to get any of that paint into it. And holding it in my hand, I'm just going to very quickly put a coat of paint on it. And you don't need very much. And the sealer dries really quick, and because it's so much relief on this heart project, if you have too much on, you'll get runs and globby bits in the nooks and crannies. So if you do, just wipe any excess off on a paper towel and keep spreading that over. You'll find that it goes a long way. So one dip, you'll be able to do your whole heart, and it possibly could be too much for the first coat. So there we go, that's all it needs. Now I'm going to dry it. It dries really quickly. You can make it as shiny as you want, and but I usually do at least 2 to 3 coats on the front of my heart, 1 coat on the back just to seal the back, but the front is to give it a little bit of a glow. And you can put more on if you want, but always drying in between and making sure it's another coat of sealer. two today. But you can just see how the colours, that gold pops out again once you've got the sealer on it, and the paint is quite a little bit shiny. It's not gloss, it's more of a satin, but you can make it, you know, glossier if you put more coats on. Okay, turn it over. Last bit. And you can see how quickly it dries. So once again, it's touch dry. I wouldn't hang it on the wall right now because it might stick, because you need to give it at least 24 hours before you hang it up. But if you can see that, you'll be able to just see how it's got that extra glow on it more than it had before when it was just painted with the chalk paint. And that's our colour washed heart. But like I said, you can use that on any project, and I hope you do. I'd love to see what you know, projects that you can do with the colour washing. So next time, come and see what else we can show you.